What if your parents could return you like a defective product? In our community, parents were permitted to return any child who showed imperfection by age 7, and my stutter had just appeared. I was 6 when it started. One day I was watching my friend Ember get dragged to the transition home because she'd started having seizures, and the next day I couldn't get through a sentence without tripping over my words. My father Aldrich noticed immediately. He was on the Council of Purity, so he knew all the signs to watch for. At breakfast that morning, he set down his coffee and looked at me like I was already gone. The council has started your evaluation, Senna. You have until your 7th birthday to fix this defect, or we'll have to let you go. Your brother James is showing real promise. We can't risk his corruption. My mother Constance just nodded and went back to cutting James's pancakes into perfect squares. She'd had practice with this. She'd already returned my siblings Meadow and Jasper. Meadow for bedwetting, Jasper for a lazy eye. I'd seen the silver pins on her dress, one for each returned child. Badges of honor in our compound. The Haven of Tomorrow had rules about everything, but the main one was simple. Children had to be perfect by 7 or they got returned. Not to a store or anything. They drove you out to a highway rest stop hours away and left you there. Then they burned all your stuff and nobody was allowed to say your name again. My parents started my correction immediately. Constance would make me stand in the bathtub and recite the compound prayers. Every time I stuttered, she'd push my head under the water, just for a few seconds at first, then longer. Aldrich had his own methods. He'd make me read the community guidelines out loud for hours. If I stuttered once, I had to start over from the beginning. But the worst part was watching them train James. He was only 4, but they were already teaching him to call me the broken one. He used to sneak into my room at night and whisper, "Sorry, Senna," in our made-up language we'd created together. But as my 7th birthday got closer, even those visits stopped. I found my transition bag under my parents' bed one day when I was looking for my confiscated books. It was already packed. 3 days worth of clothes, some water, and a note that said, "Defective child, do not return." The breaking point came when I snuck into Aldrich's study to look for information about Meadow and Jasper. Instead, I found a calendar with my return date circled in red ink, 3 days after my birthday. They'd already decided. That's when I started planning. I stole the compound van keys and hid them in the chicken coop. I used my afternoon reflection time to practice running the forest path to town, 12 miles through dense woods. I stashed water bottles and granola bars in hollow trees along the way. I cut my hair short with Constance's sewing scissors, so I'd be harder to recognize if anyone found me after the return. The night before my assessment, I made my move. I whispered goodbye to James in our language and slipped out through the window I'd been loosening for weeks. The compound was dark, and I knew the guard rotation by heart. I made it to the tree line before anyone noticed. I ran harder than I'd ever run in my life. My lungs burned and branches tore at my clothes, but I didn't stop. I could see the town lights getting closer when I heard the dogs. Aldrich had released the tracking dogs, and I could hear voices spreading through the forest. I pushed harder, but I was just a kid, and they were adults who knew these woods. They caught me 2 miles from town. The sheriff was Aldrich's cousin. Of course he was. He loaded me into his cruiser while Aldrich thanked him for finding their troubled daughter. Nobody in town would believe a stuttering 6-year-old over the respected council member. They locked me in the transition home that night. Through the walls, I could hear the emergency council meeting. They were voting to lower the return age to 5 because of my rebellion infection. They couldn't risk other children getting ideas. Constance came to see me once. She didn't say anything, just stood there while workers loaded boxes of my belongings onto the burning pile. I watched through the window as my toys and clothes went up in flames. The compound families gathered around like it was a celebration. On my last night, I heard Aldrich talking to the driver. They weren't going to wait for my birthday. Too risky. They'd return me at dawn while everyone was sleeping. Make it look like I'd never existed at all. I was carving my name into the wall with the others when I heard something outside. A small voice whispered through the crack under the door in our made-up language. "Senna, I took something from Father's room. Something important. Be ready." It was James. Full story on channel linked below.